Something that I found interesting is there was a period, as you've just mentioned last year, when Harry came over here and we were hearing a lot about sort of what was going on with their relationship. He was by his father's side and he said that he wasn't able to catch up with him in May. There's been, after the BBC interview, a period of relative quiet in terms of where their relationship was at. Why do you think now, very much now, we're hearing so much about it?
I think it's...
Where's it coming from is, I guess, what I'm asking.
So that BBC interview was a huge moment, and, Harry clearly experienced, restraint collapse, basically. He'd clearly gone in. I'm sure that they had that interview booked in the diary before they knew the outcome of the case, and Harry probably imagined that he was going to go in there and give this plea for reconciliation with his family. Then he saw he'd lost the case and just was furious about it, and so he started, giving these swipes at Charles in the middle of this interview that was supposed to be calling for reconciliation. And so I thought that had a huge potential to blow any chance that he had, but it is promising to see these new meetings taking place. I think the reason behind it, though, is fundamentally because Harry had a clear out, and Meghan had a clear out of their PR team on both sides of the Atlantic. They brought new people in who have come with new energy and a real determination to move the dial in terms of public opinion, move the dial in terms of media coverage of the Sussexes, and that comes with it, move the dial in terms of the relationship with the palace.
And so we know what's happened so far. We know that the meetings happened. We've had this report about the diary being shared. What do you expect may happen with this situation now down the line in terms of Harry coming here, him having face-to-face possibly with the King?
I think he's trying to get reconciliation before the King goes. I mean, he did obviously say in that BBC interview, I don't know how much longer my father has left, and obviously dropped a bunch more bombshells in that interview. It wasn't that long ago, so it's kind of crazy now that they're trying to share diary slots and trying to figure out how he can kind of get back in with the royal fold, because Queen Elizabeth II did say, you can't have it both ways. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out royals. I don't want that. And I think that this is really betraying what she wanted for them. They need to choose. I just don't agree with this hybrid situation. They're like typical millennial royals who want to do gig economy jobs in the royal family or something. I don't exactly know what their whole plan is. It's a very confused strategy. And I do agree that they've got a better team who's clearly trying to fashion something out of this. But I just think it's a very confused, dilapidated thing, and I don't see it going anywhere.
We can't really mention Harry without Meghan. So there's an interesting claim about her time in the royal family, which has resurfaced from Valentine Lowe's royal biography, Courtiers. Now, we've had him on the show here. He's a wonderful source, and he alleged in it that Meghan had left a, quote, trail of evidence behind so that when the time came for Harry and Meghan to leave, she'd be able to say, look how they failed to support me. I want to ask, what do you make of this claim?
I'm sure she did. I think in some ways it's a rational thing to do. And I think a lot of people would have done exactly that. I think the problem is not necessarily with Meghan doing that. The problem is actually with the way that Harry and Meghan kind of piled in quite relentlessly on the royals. And particularly, I do think that even the Oprah interview, they did botch it. Certain aspects of it were botched. And could have been done differently and better in a way that would be less toxic and destructive. For example, the racism allegation, they have clearly kind of tried to change it retrospectively or row it back. So obviously they botched, Meghan botched how she described that story. So I'm not, it's so insanely intense being a royal, for all of them, including William, including Kate. I actually don't think that it's a problem to be trying to collect these little bits and pieces as a safeguard to protect yourself. The problem is not the operation to protect herself.
Let's talk about the sudden buzz around Prince Harry wanting to reconcile with the royal family. According to sources, there's chatter about a peace summit. Harry might visit the UK soon, and apparently the idea is to sit down with King Charles. Meghan, she's allegedly staying out of it, but giving her blessing. But here's the real question. Is this truly about healing old wounds, or is something else at play? Spoiler, it's something else. Look at the timing. Their Spotify deal? Gone. Netflix? Reportedly not thrilled. Archewell? Quiet. Public favor? Fading, especially in the US, where they once had more sympathy. So what do you do when the narrative turns against you? You pivot. You try to reclaim control by appearing reasonable, humble, and, of course, willing to forgive. Even if you spend the last 2 years lobbing grenades across the Atlantic. This isn't a peace offering. It's damage control dressed up as diplomacy.
Was the operation to try to destroy everybody else, which didn't come out for several years. But, there's always been this thing that Meghan's kind of intimated that she's got receipts. That was, in the days after Oprah, one of her friends went on ITV and said, we've got the receipts to prove everything. There was also a point where she was giving an interview and she said, I've never signed anything, so I can say whatever I want. So she's always had this tendency to give these kind of slightly veiled threats that she's sitting on this bombshell. There's one point I think they suggested they'd found their diaries that they kept during these periods. So they've always had been floating these ideas that they're sitting on a kind of a massive nuclear warhead that they can drop at any point. But ultimately, actually, they destroyed themselves by the way that they just basically relentlessly attacked Harry's own family in a context when no one was fighting back. And so they may well still be sitting on unused material that Harry says he'll never share. But it kind of doesn't matter anymore, because even if they did, they're so uniformly viewed as the villains, particularly in Britain. But even in America, they're not viewed in this protective way anymore. So even if they are sitting on some unexploded bombs, I don't actually think that the royals need to be too scared of it.
Well, this story hasn't been confirmed. That allegation hasn't been confirmed by either side, of course, I should say. If it were true that she had, let's take away the cynical aspect just for argument's sake then and say that she was safeguarding it.
Here's where the plan unravels. You can't say the royal family was toxic, racist, neglectful, and then turn around and suggest peace talks as if this is a family squabble over holiday plans. It sends a contradictory message. They mistreated us, but we're open to reconciliation. Also, we're not sorry for anything we said. But please take us seriously as bridge builders. It's like trying to sue your boss, then asking for your job back. The narrative doesn't hold. Now, let's look at the other side. The royal family has been eerily consistent. No public back and forth. No tell-all interviews. Just silence. And it's working. Why would Charles or William risk reigniting the media circus by engaging in talks that might leak, spin, or collapse? Their silence sends a message. We've moved on. You should too. It's cold, yes, but it's strategic, and it leaves Harry and Meghan looking like they're talking to themselves. So here's the real motive. These so-called peace talks aren't about mending emotional ties.
If it were true, has it been an effective strategy for her to collect that information? Did the quote that Valentine Lowe used was hijack the narrative as it turned against her? Do you think that was effective?
She turned the narrative against herself. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, I think she probably thought she was safeguarding herself. She probably thought she was collecting all these pebbles of information that she could then fling at the royal family once she exited. But I think actually the bombshell is the bullying allegations and the investigation that is still withheld by the royal family that went into Meghan when she lived at Kensington Palace, and what she has done to the staff. I mean, there were reports that she reduced people to tears. And I just think that stuff that the palace is actually protecting Meghan from. And I think it's really the other way around. I think the palace was a victim of her, not she a victim of the palace. And I think they've used every single bit of information that they can and monetized it and sold it to Netflix and wrote a book and did a podcast. And I don't think there's anything else left. I really don't think there is.
I've said that so many times along the way, though. And I have been wrong. I have been wrong. Very wrong.
Please. I mean, I can't. I can't take it.
You do make a really interesting point, which is that actually with the bullying allegations, in a way, the palace did exactly the same thing, because Jason did what any civil servant worth their salt knows to do, which is to, if you have concerns, put them down on record. And that's what he did. But the allegations that Meghan was bullying her staff had been around for a while by the time that he wrote that now famous email to Simon Case, William's private secretary, saying that Meghan had bullied 2 PAs out of the royal household. And he basically put down on his concerns on record and then resigned because he couldn't cope with it anymore. And it's very clear what he's doing, because 1,000 civil servants have done the same thing in different contexts. But it is rational and it is logical. But like you say, the way actually that it destroyed Meghan and Harry's reputations is actually not the fact that the allegation was made, but the fact that they didn't mention it to Oprah. So they went
Yeah.
out and they gave this whole interview to Oprah, and they said, Harry said, my family really welcomed Meghan, and then everything changed after they saw how brilliant she was at the job. And that just isn't true, because we know that this massive argument was happening about whether Meghan was bullying the staff, and that was real. And so the fact that they didn't say it to Oprah ultimately was what was so undermining.
They're about repositioning Harry and Meghan as mature, forgiving, forward-looking figures, regardless of whether the royals respond. They don't need an actual reunion. They just need the appearance of outreach. That way, when nothing happens, they can say, "Well, we tried. It's PR theater. Nothing more." Here's the problem. The audience has changed. People are tired of the contradictions, tired of the victim narrative paired with luxury lifestyles, tired of hearing authenticity from people in Montecito mansions. This peace talk strategy is confused at best and tone-deaf at worst. Without real accountability, without a shift in tone. It's not reconciliation. It's rebranding. And it's not working. Harry and Meghan had a shot at independence. They had global sympathy, a clean slate, and a chance to write a new story. But instead of clarity, they've chosen contradiction. Instead of consistency, confusion. And now this peace talk? It's just the latest chapter in a story that feels less like a royal drama and more like a poorly written spin-off that's run out of plot.